Youorns. Greetings, fellow Watford fans. Omar here, and it's time for a brand new edition of the Youorns 10-minute take on Watford 1, Bristol City 4. Well, I don't want to take 10 minutes to talk about this game because this game was a forgettable one from a Watford standpoint. On Boxing Day, Watford got boxed. They got their ears boxed. And I think Watford, among other things, were guilty of eating too much Christmas turkey, and they got the stuffing knocked out of them in the game on Tuesday against the Bristol Rovers side, I should say, excuse me, Bristol City side, who were absolutely on it from the word go. Watford just did not get out of the traps, did not get out of bed, did not get out of the dressing room in this game. It happened, and it was very clear from the start that Watford were much more lethargic in this game. Didn't move the ball quickly enough, which is a very important point for Watford. And I thought they never really got to grips with this game at all. And I think the mandate in these kinds of games is to settle into the game and get into the tempo and rhythm of the game. And I thought Watford looked very disjointed in this game. I think they were very much all over the map in this game, especially defensively, which led to the first Bristol City goal just before the half-hour mark. Bristol City moved the ball with purpose. They looked like they had a game plan. They were very precise, and they scored off a really poor defensive play. And Ben Hamer perhaps could have got a hand to that ball, but look, the defense in front of him was not doing its job properly. In fact, as a team defensively, Watford just didn't do their job at all. And when Wesley Hook put through his own goal right at the end of the half, it was always going to be a long way back for Watford. And Watford, though, still tried. It's not like they did not try to get back in the game. In fact, even tried to win the game, try to equalize the game. It's just that they were not in the same place or in the same frame of mind, for at least the way it looked to me, as Bristol City were. And so when the second half began and Val made some changes, Georgie came on, scored his first Watford goal, and scored it within about 5 minutes of the restart. But unfortunately for Watford, literally another 25 seconds after that, Bristol City restored their two-goal lead. And I think that goal, along with the own goal by West Hook, those two moments really crystallized the game from a Watford perspective. And that killed off the game as well for Watford. And Bristol City kept going onwards and upwards. They added a fourth goal through Andy Vyman, the former Watford man, and he had no problem celebrating at Vicarage Road in front of the Bristol City fan base as Bristol City handed Watford an embarrassing defeat at home, much in the same way that Watford were handed a defeat to Preston just a couple of weekends ago. But look, this is how football works sometimes. Watford just weren't ready to play this game. But they have to be better. They have to be better in these situations, even when Watford were winning games, as they have done over these last 14 games. They've lost just 3 times in 14 games, which is still a very good, solid run. But when Watford were winning games, they were conceding the goals first. And in a lot of these games, that means that the mentality isn't right coming out of the dressing room to start these games. We're going back to an area where Watford struggled earlier this season and in previous seasons to get off to good starts. And what they're now doing over some of these last 14 games, maybe about 7 or 8 of them, is not getting off to good starts and having to come from behind all the time. They had to come from behind, of course, in the game you remember against Preston. They had to come from behind in the game against Blackburn. They had to come from behind the game against Southampton. They had to come from behind the game against Norwich. And they had to try to come from behind in this game, which they didn't do, obviously, against Bristol City. And look, this is what happens. Watford have to find their mentality in this game, find themselves before they get to the 20-minute mark in these games. You might have the first 3 or 4 minutes be a little bit of a test and you're feeling each other out, two teams on the pitch kind of being very cagey. But one thing you can't do is get to the 20, 25-minute mark and you're still not finding your way into the game. And Watford never got anywhere in this game. They never found a way into the game. They were always, I think, spectators. They were not only second best in this game, Watford, they were spectators in the game. And by the time they tried to muster anything in the game was already over. Even when Georgie scored, the game was really over because Bristol City had found a rhythm and a groove. And what Watford have got to do in these games is not allow another team to A, settle in the game, and B, dictate the terms of the engagement of the game. What Watford must do is settle in the game and dictate the terms of the engagement. They must do what these away sides and these sides in general have been doing in this long run that Watford have been on. And Watford must, I think, get back to the basics in terms of making sure that they come out of the dressing room with the mentality and the focus to try to get an early lead, to settle in the game quickly, and then to define the way the tempo of the game is going to go. Because in this game, Watford never had the tempo, never had the rhythm, never had the consistency or the cohesion in this game. And that's why the game was so uneven for Watford. That's why they did not play football, I think, in a very even or purposeful way. I thought that a lot of what they did was very reactive. And we've seen this in other games, but I thought that this game particularly, Watford just didn't show up. Watford didn't have a commitment to showing up to the game. And you can see it very early on when you're not moving the ball quickly enough. This is going to happen. And Watford have got to establish that tempo early in the game. And whether they're home or away, move the ball more quickly and have some purpose and tempo and get yourself into a game. And I get it. Sometimes games are not easy to settle into. There's certain tactics you have to take advantage of or account for from the other side. You've got lots of things that go on in games, and there's a setup that happens, and you begin to see what the formation of the other team is and what their approach is and how they're going to use that formation to make life uncomfortable. That's one thing. But Watford have got to control what they can control. And what Watford can control in these games is their own mindset and their own approach to tempo and adjustment and to getting into a game and being proactive with your football and being proactive with your approach to the game. And once Watford start to get that right and get that back to where it had been in some of these other games, I think you'll begin to see less of Watford conceding these goals first or conceding these goals early. Whether the goals conceded in the first minute or two, as it was in the game against Blackburn, or whether it's scored in the 30th or 29th minute, as it was in the game against Bristol City, Watford just have to have a better mindset about these games when they're coming out of the tunnel, coming out of the dressing room to start these games. It's the way that Watford start these games, I think, that it will often, in large part, dictate how these goals and these games go. Because if Watford start the game out sluggish, chances are they're probably not going to get 3 points. There have been exceptions, of course, we've seen them recently. But if Watford start these games with purpose and passion and fire and all kinds of brimstone and all these kinds of things, you're going to see a Watford side that are going to be much more likely to not only score goals, but win games as well. This has been the YouOrns 10-minute take.